The cameras were already rolling. Bright lights beamed down on the polished stage, casting long shadows behind the sleek white couch where Daniel Knight sat, grinning like he owned the world. The audience clapped politely, unsure whether to laugh or cringe at his last comment. "She used to be sexy before she started eating for two," he quipped, tossing a wink at his co-host, the infamous fitness influencer Cleo Ray. Her laughter was sharp, rehearsed. Behind the scenes, just a few feet away, standing in the wings of the auditorium, was Ava. She didn't blink. Didn't move. She just stared. 7 months pregnant, wearing a long navy blue dress that clung gently to her swollen belly, Ava Knight looked nothing like the women Daniel usually appeared with on magazine covers. There was no heavy makeup. No designer flash. Just quiet, composed strength. But the real difference wasn't in appearance. It was in knowing. She knew the truth now. For weeks, the pieces had been coming together. Receipts tucked between jacket linings, late-night phone calls that ended too quickly, perfume that wasn't hers lingering on his shirts. But Ava hadn't confronted him, not yet. She'd waited. Planned. And then she found the USB drive. At first, she thought it was one of his media tools, maybe press kits or photos for the brand he was building. But when she plugged it in, alone, one evening while he was out with the boys, what she saw chilled her. It wasn't just an affair. It was betrayal on another level, cruel, mocking, recorded in both video and voice. He'd been documenting things. Laughing about her. Making jokes to Cleo behind her back. Compiling a kind of before and after reel of her body throughout the pregnancy for what he called a personal project. Personal project. She almost threw up when she heard that. And then, something clicked inside her. Not rage. Not despair. Something colder. A plan. So, she contacted the event coordinator. She told them she wanted to support her husband on stage, make a surprise appearance. Daniel always loved grand gestures. The idea of a supportive, glowing wife showing up at his brand's health and wellness conference? Perfect PR. He said yes, of course. He had no idea she was bringing more than support. The moment her voice echoed through the auditorium, everything changed. I hope she was worth it. Daniel turned like he'd been shot, his face pale under the lights. Cleo Ray stiffened beside him. She gave a nervous smile to the cameras before slowly backing away. She knew. Or at least she suspected. Ava saw it all in her eyes, the realization that this moment wasn't safe. Ava stepped forward into the spotlight, the USB stick pinched between two fingers like a loaded weapon. The audience shifted, suddenly alert. Phones came up. Recording. Streaming. Capturing. Daniel opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Ava, sweetheart, what are you doing? Showing them who you really are, she said. Calm. Clear. No drama in her tone, just truth. The event organizer, a flustered man in a tight headset, whispered frantically into his mic to cut the feed. But it was too late. The stream was already live across Daniel's social platforms, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. And Ava had sent a backup copy of the files to herself. Just in case. She looked out into the audience. I know this isn't what you expected when you came here today. But I think the truth deserves space too. Her hand didn't shake as she handed the USB to the technician beside the soundboard. Play it. 6 months earlier. If you had seen Daniel and Ava back then, you'd think they were perfect. Power couple. Glamorous. Smiling for the press at charity events. Launching businesses. Traveling to Bali, Maldives, Santorini. Always glowing. But that version of them existed mostly online. Behind the scenes, the cracks had started before the wedding. Daniel liked to control things. Conversations, appearances, her schedule. At first, Ava mistook it for confidence. Direction. Leadership. It wasn't. After she got pregnant, it got worse. "You're letting yourself go," he'd said one night after she ordered dessert at a restaurant. "Think of the brand." She laughed it off, tried to ignore it. When she cried in the bathroom later that night, he told her she was being dramatic. "You're hormonal, babe. Come on. Don't make a scene." And she didn't. Not then. Back on stage, the video began to play. It started innocently. Daniel, in a gym, talking about fatherhood. Cleo beside him, giggling. Then the tone shifted. Clips of him mocking Ava's food cravings. Laughing about her chubby ankles. Cleo joining in. "She's gonna explode before the baby even gets here," he said in one clip, high-fiving Cleo. The audience gasped. Someone in the front row stood up and walked out. Another whispered, "This can't be real." But it was. And Ava stood there, letting them watch. Letting them see the man behind the curated Instagram posts and motivational speeches. By the time the video ended, the auditorium was silent. Daniel looked like he might throw up. "Ava," he began. She held up a hand. "I'm not here to argue. I'm not even here to shame you. I just want to stop pretending. For myself. For my child. And for every woman who's ever been humiliated in private while the world praised her partner in public." Someone in the audience clapped. Then another. Then the whole room. Daniel tried to speak again, but his mic had been cut. Later that night, the video went viral. Within hours, media outlets picked it up. Fitness mogul exposed by pregnant wife in viral on-stage showdown. She deserves better, internet rallies behind brave Ava Knight. The day the brand crumbled. Daniel's sponsors began pulling out. Cleo released a carefully worded statement, "I had no idea about the extent of Daniel's behavior. I stand with Ava." Of course she did. But Ava didn't care. She wasn't checking the news. She wasn't reading comments. She wasn't watching the numbers rise. She was home. In her quiet apartment, curled on the couch with a glass of cold milk and her hands resting on her belly. The baby kicked gently. "You and me," she whispered. "We're going to be just fine." But what Ava didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that this moment, this stunning public reckoning, was only the beginning. Because Daniel had secrets of his own. And someone else had been watching all along. The morning after the incident, the world had shifted. For Ava, it began with silence. No buzzing phone. No alert pings. Just a strange stillness in the apartment. She'd turned off her notifications the night before. After everything that happened on stage, she didn't want to drown in opinions, praise, or hate. She wanted quiet. She woke to soft gray light seeping through the blinds and the faint rhythm of rain tapping against the windows. The baby shifted gently in her belly as if sensing the weight of what had been set into motion. Then her phone buzzed. Just once. A private number. She stared at it, hesitated, and let it ring out. A few seconds later, it buzzed again, this time, a text message. Same unknown number. You've only scratched the surface. There's more. Much more. Her blood ran cold. She stared at the message, unsure whether it was a threat or a warning. Another text arrived, this time with a file attachment. No words. Just a file named night_foundation_offshore_17x.mp4. Her hands trembled as she held the phone. She didn't open the file. Not yet. She sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing, mind spinning. What the hell was this? And who sent it? Across the city, Daniel Knight wasn't sleeping either. His lawyer, his agent, and 2 members of his public relations team were packed into his penthouse living room. His phone was a war zone. Emails, missed calls, messages from clients backing out, news outlets demanding statements, social media in meltdown. The empire he built was crumbling in real time. And the worst part? He hadn't even seen it coming. "She ambushed me," he muttered, pacing near the window in a gray hoodie, hair unwashed, eyes sunken. Like some damn movie scene. His agent, a stern woman in a navy pantsuit, didn't look up from her tablet. "You mocked your pregnant wife on stage. And you recorded it. What did you think would happen?" "She wasn't supposed to find the drive," Daniel snapped. "I was going to delete it. It was just jokes. Stupid stuff." "Stupid stuff cost you 7 brand deals overnight," his lawyer added coldly. But none of that scared Daniel as much as what came next. He opened his email. An anonymous message sat in his inbox, timestamped at 2:14 a.m. "You lied to the world. Ready for them to find out the rest?" Attached, the same file Ava had received. His fingers froze above the keyboard. He knew that file name. He hadn't seen it in years. That was supposed to be buried. 5 years ago, before Daniel launched his Knight Foundation, before the world called him a wellness guru, before the books and the YouTube fame, there was another Daniel. One who got involved with people he shouldn't have. A silent investor approached him with an offer, money, a platform, a fast track to fame. All Daniel had to do was play the part, the motivational man with a clean story and an inspiring brand. He took the deal. The problem was, that investor wasn't who he claimed to be. And Daniel wasn't the only pawn in his game. Back in Ava's apartment, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at her laptop. The file was loaded. Paused on the first frame. A grainy video of Daniel, younger, thinner, dressed in a cheap suit, standing in what looked like a luxury apartment. Behind him was a whiteboard with numbers, names, and offshore accounts scribbled all over it. She hit play. The voice that came through the speakers wasn't Daniel's. It belonged to another man, off camera, instructing him. "You'll register the holding company in Belize. We funnel the assets through Knight Wellness. No one asks questions if it's under a charity. You understand?" Daniel nodded. Smiled even. "What if someone digs too deep?" he asked. "They won't. They'll be too busy believing in your redemption arc. People eat that stuff up. You were broke, now you're rich. Add a few childhood trauma stories. Cry on cue. Done." Ava's heart pounded. This wasn't just shady business. This was fraud. High-level financial fraud. And Daniel was in the middle of it. That evening, Ava received another message. This time, the sender identified themselves, at least partially. "I used to work for him. Until I realized what he really was. There are more files. And people in danger. You exposed the mask. Now help me bring down the man behind it." She didn't know whether to trust it. She didn't know who him was referring to, Daniel or someone else. But the weight of it all sat heavy on her chest. She felt the baby kick again. Hard this time. As if reacting to her panic. She wasn't just a betrayed wife anymore. She was a key to something bigger. And it terrified her. Meanwhile, Daniel made a phone call he'd hoped he'd never have to make again. It went to voicemail. He tried again. Still nothing. Finally, he texted. "They're resurfacing the old files. Shut it down. Now." The reply came instantly. "You're on your own. You knew the risks." Daniel threw his phone across the room. He sat on the floor, gripping his head, breath shallow. This wasn't just about losing sponsorships or public image anymore. This was about staying out of prison. The next morning, Ava received a package at her door. No return address. Inside was a black flash drive, a burner phone, and a note. They'll come for you if they know what you have. Use this only if you're ready to go all the way. Ava stood in her doorway, heart pounding, looking down the hallway as if expecting someone to be watching. Was this a threat? Or a lifeline? Later that night, as the rain returned, Ava met with her friend and former journalist, Mara, in a quiet corner of a cafe. Mara had left the media world after being burned one too many times by corporate censorship. But she still had her instincts, and her contacts. After Ava explained everything, Mara leaned back, visibly shaken. "You're sitting on the kind of story that brings down empires," she said. "But this kind of thing doesn't end with headlines. It ends with silence. Or worse." "Then I need your help," Ava said. "I can't do this alone." Mara hesitated. Then nodded. "I'll dig." Quietly. "But if we're doing this, you have to be prepared for what we find. This doesn't sound like just Daniel. This sounds like a network." Ava nodded slowly. "I think it is." That same night, Daniel's condo was broken into. No valuables were stolen. But something important was missing, a black briefcase he'd kept locked in his office closet. Inside that briefcase were papers, codes, and details of accounts that linked everything back to him. He'd planned to burn them if it ever came to this. Now they were gone. And Daniel knew exactly who took them. Not Ava. Not the media. But someone who used to work for him. Someone who knew everything. Someone he thought was dead. Rain clung to the streets like memory. Heavy, cold, and unwanted. Ava sat in the passenger seat of Mara's dusty old hatchback, staring at the envelope in her lap. It had arrived that morning, hand-delivered, no return address, again. Inside were printed screenshots. Bank transactions. Flight logs. And a single photo. A young man. Shaved head. Leather jacket. A jagged scar down the side of his neck. She didn't recognize him. But the name written in ink beneath the photo made her stomach twist. Luca Rains. Ava glanced at Mara. "You ever heard of him?" Mara was quiet for a moment, tapping her fingers on the steering wheel. "Yeah," she said. "I've heard the name. He was in with some heavy people a few years back, money laundering, corporate blackmail. Disappeared after that charity scandal with the Horizon Foundation." "That's the same name on one of the offshore accounts tied to Daniel," Ava whispered. She held up one of the screenshots. "He was the one pulling the strings." Mara nodded grimly. "And Daniel was one of his puppets. 3 years earlier. Zurich, Switzerland. Daniel Knight sat across from Luca Rains in a private lounge above a bank, one of those glass and steel fortresses built for the ultra-rich. He hadn't wanted to come, but when Luca called, you showed up. No one said no to Luca. Not if you wanted to keep your name clean and your life comfortable. "You've done well," Luca said, swirling a glass of something dark and expensive. "The Knight Foundation is a nice front. Makes you look charitable. Compassionate. Human." Daniel tried to smile, but his throat was dry. "It's not a front. I mean, we actually help people." Luca leaned forward. "No, Daniel. I help people. You just smile for the cameras." Daniel looked down, ashamed but unable to break away. He owed Luca too much, the seed money, the contacts, the media push that made his rise to fame almost overnight. All of it had come at a price. And the interest was still accruing. "Remember," Luca said, his voice soft but razor-sharp. You don't get to walk away clean. Not ever. Now, 3 years later, Luca was back, or maybe he had never left. And he wasn't hiding anymore. Ava turned the photo over in her hands. On the back, a handwritten note. You're not safe. He'll come for you too. Don't trust anyone who worked with Daniel between 2019 to 2022. Some of them work for Luca now. The paranoia crept in like fog. She looked at Mara. You trust your old contacts? Mara gave a dry laugh. I don't even trust my own landlord. They drove in silence for a while, heading to an off-grid safe house Mara had access to. A cabin upstate, no Wi-Fi, no smart devices, no digital trail. If someone was watching Ava, tracking her, this might be the only place they wouldn't look. You sure you want to go down this road? Mara asked as they turned onto a dirt path flanked by tall trees. I don't have a choice anymore, Ava replied, one hand instinctively resting on her belly. This isn't just about Daniel cheating. Or about his brand falling apart. This is something else. Something darker. And I need to know the truth, before someone else gets hurt. Back in the city, Daniel stood in his office, staring out at the skyline. His hands were clenched behind his back, his jaw tight. A voice behind him said, "She's digging." Daniel didn't turn around. I know. She got the photo. The files. The name. Daniel's silence stretched. The voice, smooth, cold, belonging to a man named Carson, one of Luca's old fixers, stepped closer. You were supposed to handle this. I didn't know she'd go this far, Daniel muttered. Carson gave a small smirk. She's smarter than you gave her credit for. Daniel spun around. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to build something real. All I did was take the first step, and suddenly I'm in over my head with criminals and blackmail Anne. Carson raised a hand. Spare me the guilty monologue. You benefited. Now you're exposed. And the only question is, how far are you willing to go to bury her side of the story? Daniel froze. I won't hurt her. Carson arched an eyebrow. Then you better hope someone else doesn't decide to. At the cabin, Ava and Mara lit a fire and laid out all the materials on the floor, every photo, every file, every piece of evidence. Ava stared at the pattern emerging between the documents: offshore shell companies, fake charities, massive wire transfers, names connected to people who were now either missing, or dead. And one document stood out. A signed agreement. Daniel Knight and Luca Rains, agreeing to open a series of wellness retreats globally. Each one serving as a front for laundering millions in investor money. But there was a third signature, faded and smudged. C. Monroe, Mara read aloud. That's not a name I've heard. Ava frowned. Daniel mentioned a Charlie once. In passing. Said he was a silent partner in the early days. Maybe that's him. Mara scanned the document again. We need to find out. If Charlie Monroe's still around, he might be the link to everything. Suddenly, the burner phone rang. Ava jumped. 1 ring. 2. 3. She picked up, heart in her throat. A scrambled voice came through. Digitally distorted. You have 72 hours before they make you disappear. Ava's breath caught. Who are you? A friend. One of the last. What do they want? Silence. Luca's about to make a move. And Daniel, he's already given them something. Something they can use against you. The line went dead. Ava dropped the phone, her pulse racing. Mara looked at her. We need to go deeper. Now. The next day, Mara made contact with an old journalist friend who had once investigated the Horizon Foundation scandal before it was buried. They met him in a library basement, off the record, no names exchanged. He brought a flash drive. There were 3 whistleblowers, he whispered. 2 died in mysterious accidents. 1 vanished. But before she disappeared, she sent me these. The files contained emails between Daniel and someone named C. Monroe. References to cleaning up loose ends. Mentions of Ava, even before she was pregnant. Mara scrolled faster. They were watching you, Ava. Planning. Your pregnancy wasn't just inconvenient to Daniel's image. It was a liability. They wanted to keep you quiet. Even before you knew anything. Ava felt the floor tilt under her. They were going to silence me? They still might. Back in the city, Daniel sat alone in his apartment, staring at a photo of Ava from the early days. Before the cameras. Before the lies. She had a glow in her smile he hadn't seen in years, maybe because he'd slowly drained it from her. A knock at the door. Daniel opened it, and froze. Luca Rain stood there, alive, very real, and very angry. Daniel's heart raced as Luca Rain stood in the doorway, his shadow spilling across the floor like a dark omen. It had been years since Daniel had seen him face to face, but some people didn't change. Luca was still the same, composed, calculated, and dangerously calm. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The silence hung thick between them, charged with history and old debts. You think you can just walk away, Daniel? Luca's voice was low, each word measured, yet there was an edge to it that made Daniel's pulse spike. Daniel's throat tightened. I told you, I'm done. The foundation, the charities. I didn't know what it would become. Luca's lips curled into a small, humorless smile. That's the problem, isn't it? You never knew. You thought it was about helping people. But it was always about power, money, and control. You were just a useful tool. Daniel stepped back, his body tense, but his mind racing. This isn't me anymore, Luca. I've built something real. I want out. Luca stepped inside, uninvited, his eyes sweeping over the apartment with a detached assessment. You think they'll let you leave? You think your redemption arc was ever real? Daniel flinched at the words. Redemption. That was the narrative he had sold to the public. A broken man finding himself through wellness and self-help. The truth, however, was far messier. His rise to fame had been orchestrated, a carefully crafted illusion spun by Luca and others who had no intention of letting him go. You owe me more than you think, Luca continued, his tone chillingly casual. More than just money, Daniel. And you'll pay up. Daniel's eyes narrowed. I don't owe you anything. Luca raised an eyebrow, his gaze turning icy. Is that so? You've been living off my investment, my connections, my networks. And now you're trying to distance yourself from everything? You're not that naive. You're mine, Daniel. Just like you've always been. For a moment, Daniel considered running. The idea of fleeing, of leaving everything behind, even if it meant leaving Ava in the dark, seemed tempting. But something held him in place, fear, guilt, or perhaps something deeper. Luca had made it clear, there was no escape. You're not getting anything from me, Luca, Daniel said, his voice low but firm. I'm done. Luca's eyes gleamed with dark amusement. You think it's that simple? He took a step closer, his presence looming over Daniel. Let me tell you something, Daniel. You'll never escape your past. And your little wife? She's already tangled in this mess. Daniel's stomach dropped at the mention of Ava. Leave her out of this. Luca chuckled, his voice filled with menace. She's already in it. You didn't think she'd find out, did you? She's digging, asking questions. What do you think will happen when she uncovers the truth? She'll come for you. She'll ruin everything you've worked for. Daniel's heart hammered in his chest as panic began to creep up his spine. He had underestimated just how far Luca's reach extended. Ava, his beautiful, naive Ava, was now a target, a part of the game he had never intended to involve her in. "What do you want?" Daniel asked, his voice tight with frustration and fear. "What's your endgame?" Luca's smile widened. "Your silence. That's all. You can keep your little foundation, your fake redemption story. But you'll stay silent about what happened. About what you've done. No one can know about the money, the deals, the people you've hurt. And if you keep quiet, you get to walk away." Daniel stood motionless, staring at the man who had once been his mentor, his benefactor, but now seemed like a ghost from a past he could never escape. "And if I don't?" Daniel asked, his voice hoarse. Luca's eyes hardened. "Then I expose everything. I take everything from you. Your foundation, your reputation, your life. I'll make sure the world knows the truth, and when I'm done, no one will believe a word you say. They'll tear you apart, Daniel. You'll have nothing." The weight of Luca's words settled over him like a suffocating blanket. Daniel had no illusions left. He wasn't free. Not yet. And certainly not while Luca still had a hand on his life. But there was one thing Daniel knew for certain: he couldn't lose Ava. He wouldn't. Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, Ava was pacing in the cramped cabin, her phone in hand, eyes glued to the screen. The message she had received earlier from the unknown caller haunted her thoughts. "You have 72 hours before they make you disappear." Ava's mind raced. Who had sent the message? And why was she suddenly a target? The more she thought about it, the more she realized how deeply involved Daniel was in something dangerous, something far beyond the wellness brand and the lies he had told her. She reached for the flash drive, which still sat on the table, untouched. She had no idea what she would find there, but she needed answers. She couldn't just sit in the dark anymore. She needed to know the truth. Mara, who had been scanning some files on her laptop, looked up. "Ava, are you sure about this? I can help you, but I need you to be prepared. The deeper we go, the harder it gets to turn back." Ava hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. She had never been a woman who backed down from a challenge, but this was different. This wasn't just about Daniel anymore. This was about survival. "I'm ready," Ava said, her voice firm. "I need to know who Daniel really is. And what he's involved in." Mara nodded and slid the flash drive into the laptop. The files began to load, and Ava held her breath as the first document appeared on the screen. It was a series of emails, the first one from someone named C. Monroe. The subject line read, "The plan, Phase 1. Deployment of the offshore accounts." Ava's eyes widened. This is it. This is what Daniel's been hiding. The emails detailed a complex financial scheme involving multiple offshore accounts, all funneled through various shell companies tied to Daniel's charity. But the real kicker was the final email, a confidential agreement between Daniel, Luca Rains, and a third party, Charlie Monroe. As Ava scrolled through the document, her heart began to race. It confirmed everything she feared. Daniel was deeper into this than she had ever imagined. He wasn't just a victim, he was an active participant in a massive criminal operation. Mara frowned. This isn't just about a scandal anymore. This is about laundering money. About blackmail. These aren't the kinds of people you walk away from. Ava looked up, her eyes wide with shock. He lied to me. He lied to all of us. Mara placed a hand on her shoulder. Ava, you're in this now. The question is, how far are you willing to go? That evening, back at Daniel's apartment, the weight of the conversation with Luca lingered in the air. He sat on the edge of his bed, running his fingers through his hair, his mind churning with everything that had happened. Luca's threat echoed in his head. If he didn't comply, if he didn't stay silent, everything he had worked for would come crashing down. But more than that, Ava's face haunted him. Her trust, her love. The way she had believed in him. The way she had always seen the best in him, even when he couldn't see it in himself. But now, everything was unraveling. And the hardest part? He had no one to blame but himself. There was a knock at the door. Daniel froze. He knew it wasn't just anyone. The chill that crawled down his spine told him exactly who it was. Luca. He stood and moved toward the door, his steps heavy. But when he opened it, he was met with the one thing he hadn't expected. Ava. Her eyes were wide with a mix of fear and anger, and she held up the flash drive. "You've been lying to me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And in that moment, Daniel realized, there was no way out. Ava's heart raced as she stood in the doorway, the flash drive heavy in her hand. She wasn't sure if it was the weight of the drive or the weight of the truth that had just shattered her world, but she couldn't bring herself to look away from Daniel's eyes. She had thought she knew him. She had trusted him more than anyone in her life, but now she wasn't sure who he was anymore. "You've been lying to me," she repeated, her voice low but steady, the anger bubbling under the surface. Daniel stood frozen, his eyes locked onto the drive in her hand. His mouth opened, as if to say something, but then closed again. He couldn't find the words. He didn't deserve the chance to explain. Not now. "Everything," Ava's voice cracked. "You used me, didn't you? For your charity. For your image. You were using us, Daniel, and I couldn't even see it. You're not the man I thought you were." Her words cut through him like a knife. But it was the silence between them, the absence of any defense or excuse from Daniel, that cut the deepest. Ava's grip tightened on the flash drive as she stepped further into the apartment, her face a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. "Say something, Daniel," she urged. "I'm waiting for some kind of explanation. A reason why I shouldn't just walk out of here right now." Daniel shook his head slowly. He wanted to explain, to beg for her forgiveness, but the reality of what he had done and what was at stake crushed his words before they could even leave his lips. "Ava, please," his voice was raw, cracking, but she cut him off, raising a hand. "No," she said firmly. "You don't get to do that anymore. No more lies. No more manipulation. Not after everything I've found. Not after everything you've done." The truth had come crashing down like a tidal wave, pulling her under. The flash drive held the proof, the emails, the offshore accounts, the connections to Luca Rains and Charlie Monroe, everything he had kept hidden from her, everything she had unknowingly been a part of. "I loved you, Daniel," she said, her voice breaking as her eyes filled with tears. "I believed in you. I stood by you. And now I don't even know who you are." Daniel's chest tightened. He had made his choices, and now he had to live with the consequences. Ava's pain was a direct result of his decisions. The guilt clawed at him. But as much as he wanted to reach out to her, to hold her and beg her to understand, there was one truth that held him back, the same one that had always held him back from being fully open with her. He wasn't free. "I'm sorry," he whispered, but the words felt hollow. Ava didn't react to his apology. Instead, she dropped the flash drive onto the table and turned away from him, walking toward the window. She stared out at the city below, but her mind was elsewhere, on the past few years, on the lies, on the manipulation that had poisoned everything. Her voice was barely a whisper when she spoke again, but it hit Daniel like a thunderclap. "I never asked for any of this, Daniel. I never asked for you to drag me into your mess. But now I'm in it, and I need to know, why." Daniel swallowed hard, stepping closer, but still keeping his distance. He had hurt her beyond words, and now, there was nothing left to protect. "Because I thought I could control it," he said, his voice laced with regret. Because I thought I could build something clean. Something real. But I was wrong. And I lost myself along the way. I lost you. And now I'm losing everything. Ava didn't look at him, but she could hear the desperation in his voice. It wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. Not now. You lost me the moment you lied to me, Daniel, she said quietly. You lost me the moment you let me believe that we were living this life together, when all along, you were playing a part. The silence between them was deafening. Daniel could feel the walls closing in around him. He had hoped for a way out, a path to redemption. But it was clear now that redemption wasn't something he could buy. It wasn't something he could manipulate. It was earned, and he had broken the only person who ever truly believed in him. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Both of them froze. It was a hard knock, quick and urgent. Daniel's first instinct was to ignore it, but his gut twisted. He knew who it was. And he knew that whatever was about to happen would change everything. Ava's hand trembled as she turned toward the door. Who is that? Daniel hesitated, then answered, Luca. The name sent a chill down her spine. The same man who had orchestrated his rise, who had controlled everything, and now seemed to be controlling their fate. The same man who had threatened Ava's safety. Don't open it, Ava said, panic creeping into her voice. We can't trust him. He'll destroy us both. Daniel looked at her, his eyes filled with fear and guilt. But his voice was steady as he spoke. If we don't, we're both dead. The door swung open, and Luca Rains stepped inside, his imposing figure filling the doorway like a dark cloud. He was still the same, calm, collected, with a sense of power that seemed to radiate from him. Behind him, there was a man in a dark suit, silent and still. Daniel, Luca greeted him, his voice cool. I see you've been busy. Ava instinctively stepped back, her body tensing. Luca's eyes briefly flickered over to her, a slight smirk curling at the corners of his mouth. I wasn't expecting company, Daniel said, his voice low. But I assume you didn't come here to chat about the weather. Luca stepped inside fully, shutting the door behind him. No, I didn't. But it seems you've made things more complicated than they needed to be. You should have stayed in your lane, Daniel. Kept your mouth shut. But now, well, you've forced my hand. Ava looked from Daniel to Luca, her mind racing. What do you want from us? Luca's gaze shifted to her, and for the first time, she saw something more than the calm confidence, something cold and calculating. You, my dear, are collateral damage. But Daniel, he turned back to Daniel, his eyes narrowing. He's going to pay for his mistakes. Daniel's chest tightened. He knew this was coming, but hearing the words out loud made it real. Luca wasn't just playing a game anymore. He was out for blood. What do you want? Daniel asked, his voice tight with the tension he could no longer hide. Luca's smirk returned. It's simple, really. I want you to disappear. I want everything you've built to crumble, and I want to make sure you're never heard from again. Your wife too. You've made the mistake of trusting her, of thinking she was on your side. You were wrong. And now, you'll both suffer. Ava stepped forward, her heart pounding. We're not afraid of you, she said, her voice defiant. Luca chuckled, unfazed. You should be. You both should be. Suddenly, the man in the suit stepped forward. Without warning, he pulled out a small device from his jacket pocket and held it up to Daniel. I've come to collect, the man said, his voice low. Your debt is overdue. Ava's eyes widened in horror. The man was holding a trigger, a detonator. No! Daniel shouted, stepping forward. But it was too late. Luca's cold voice cut through the room. You've been in this game long enough to know that when your debts come due, you don't get to walk away. Not even with a pretty little redemption story. And just like that, the weight of Daniel's past came crashing down on them both. The device in the man's hand glowed ominously in the dim light of the room. Ava could feel the panic rising in her chest, the sudden surge of fear overtaking every rational thought. The room felt like it was shrinking around her, suffocating her with the weight of the moment. Daniel stepped forward instinctively, his body tense, his eyes fixed on the detonator. But before he could take another breath, Luca Rains raised a hand, his gaze as cold as steel. "Stay where you are," Luca ordered, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You'll do nothing but watch, Daniel. This is the price you pay for all the lies. For all the people you've betrayed." Ava's heart pounded as she tried to make sense of what was happening. The man in the suit was holding a detonator. What was it for? Was it a bomb? Was it just a tool of intimidation? She couldn't think. She couldn't breathe. "No," Daniel's voice trembled with fear as he faced Luca. "You don't have to do this. There's still time. We can fix this. We can fix everything." Luca's laugh was chilling, devoid of warmth. He shook his head slowly. "You don't get it, Daniel. It's too late for redemption. You can't buy your way out anymore. This is the endgame. And there's no way out." Ava clenched her fists, every inch of her body screaming to do something, to stop this madness. But she knew one thing for sure, there was no stopping Luca. No negotiation. He was a man who operated on power, control, and fear. And right now, Daniel was the target of his rage. "You can't just destroy everything I've built," Daniel pleaded, his voice rising. "People will find out. They'll see the truth. They'll—" Luca raised his hand, cutting him off. "You never understood it, did you? None of this was about charity, about goodwill, or even about you. This was always about control. You were just another pawn in my game. And now the game is over." The room seemed to close in on Daniel as he heard Luca's words echoing in his head. The years of carefully crafted lies, the persona he had built, all of it, crumbling in an instant. He thought he had built something real. He thought he was free. But he had been living in a cage, one Luca had placed him in long ago. And now, it was too late to escape. Ava turned to Daniel, her voice breaking as she reached out. "We don't have to do this. We don't have to play by his rules. There's always a way out, Daniel. Please, don't give up." Daniel's eyes locked with hers. For a moment, he saw everything that had brought him here, the love, the hope, the belief that he could change, that he could overcome the past. But now, the truth was clear, there was no way back. "You don't understand," Daniel whispered, his voice shaking with regret. "I've tried to outrun this for so long, Ava. But now, it's over." Ava's heart shattered as she realized what Daniel was saying. He had given up. And the worst part was, she understood why. Luca had wrapped him in a web of lies so thick, so suffocating, that Daniel couldn't see any way out. Not anymore. "No," she said, her voice rising with desperation. "You haven't given up. You can't give up. You're not just this. You're more than what Luca's made you. Don't let him win." Luca's smile twisted into something cruel, watching the exchange between them with a kind of detached amusement. Such a touching little scene. "But it's all for nothing. Your attempts to save him are futile, Ava. I've already won." But Ava wasn't listening to him. Her eyes were focused entirely on Daniel. She stepped closer to him, refusing to be cowed by Luca's presence. She had seen the real Daniel, the man who had fallen in love with her, the man who had tried to build a better future. The man who had dreams, even if he had lost sight of them in the darkness of his past. "Daniel, listen to me," she said, her voice a mix of urgency and tenderness. You can fix this. We can fix this, together. But you have to fight. You can't let him control you anymore. Daniel's face twisted in anguish. He looked at Ava, the woman he loved, and for a fleeting moment, he saw the possibility of redemption. But there was a cold reality hanging over him, a suffocating certainty that the past couldn't be undone. Ava was his anchor, the light in the darkness. And yet, Luca's shadow loomed larger than anything he had ever known. "Do you think you can just save me, Ava?" he asked, his voice strained. "You don't know what I've done. You don't know the depths of it. Luca's right. I've lost everything, including you." "No!" Ava exclaimed, her eyes burning with intensity. "You haven't lost me yet, Daniel. But you will if you give up now. Don't let him break you. Don't let him win." There was a beat of silence. Then, slowly, Daniel took a step toward her. He reached for her hand, his fingers trembling as he held it in his. He could feel the weight of her words, the love in her eyes, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he realized something: he wasn't alone. "Together," Ava whispered, her voice steady. "We can figure this out. I believe in you." The room seemed to freeze as Daniel's gaze locked onto Luca. The tension was unbearable, the air thick with impending disaster. Luca, seeing the moment of weakness in Daniel, took a step forward. "I'm tired of this game," Luca said, his voice low, dangerously calm. "You've had your chances, Daniel. And you've wasted them. It's over. Time to pay for your sins." Luca's hand tightened around the detonator, but before he could press the button, a loud crash echoed through the room. The door was suddenly thrown open, and 3 figures stormed into the apartment. Ava's heart skipped a beat as she saw who it was. "Mara," she cried, recognizing her friend immediately. Alongside her were 2 men, both carrying weapons, their expressions hard and focused. They had come prepared. Luca's smirk faltered for just a moment as the scene shifted. His calm, calculating demeanor slipped, replaced by a flicker of panic. "Did you really think we wouldn't find out?" Mara's voice was cold, controlled. "You think you can control everything, Luca? You've underestimated us." The man with the detonator, the one who had been standing next to Luca, froze in place, eyes darting between the new arrivals. Luca's grip on the device tightened, but he didn't press the button. "Not yet." "What is this?" Luca demanded, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can stop me?" Mara stepped forward, her eyes locked on Luca with a mixture of contempt and determination. "You're finished. Your little empire is over. You're going down. Enough." Luca snapped, his voice now tinged with desperation. He lunged forward, but before he could get close, the man with the detonator was grabbed by one of Mara's men, his weapon knocked out of his hand. Luca's eyes widened as the situation spiraled out of control. Ava could see the realization in his eyes: he had lost. And he knew it. Ava and Daniel exchanged a look, the gravity of the moment sinking in. Luca Rains had finally been brought down. But the question still hung in the air: what now? Ava squeezed Daniel's hand. "We get out of here," she said softly. "Together." Daniel's eyes softened as he looked at her, the first real sense of peace he had felt in days washing over him. The road ahead would be difficult, and there would be no quick fixes, but for the first time in a long time, he knew they would face it side by side. Luca was taken away, his empire crumbling as the authorities moved in. The legacy of betrayal, manipulation, and greed that he had built was now a thing of the past. But for Daniel and Ava, the real work was just beginning. They had to rebuild. Reclaim their lives. And find their way back to the person they were before the chaos. The final twist wasn't the defeat of Luca or the shattering of their past. It was the realization that they could start again, together. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all.